Earlier this year, we interviewed a group of global leaders who all agreed that they were seeing increased levels of burnout and decreased levels of resilience in their employees. With this affecting even top performers who historically manage change well, it's a topic that isn't going away anytime soon, and there isn't a one stop solution. Joining me today to talk about well-being, resilience, and burnout is Sahar Muhsin Laufman. So let's get straight into it. Sahar, welcome to In Good Company. I'm delighted to have you with me today. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing really well and so glad to be invited.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And we always start our episodes with the same question so that we can get to know our guests a little bit better, which is to ask the question of tell us about yourself in 60 seconds.
Oh, wow. This one is always a bit difficult to answer when you live a life of multiplicity. I'm many things, but among them, I'm multi-religious, including Taoist. And I say that to say I have a spiritual grounding, and I often comfortably live at the intersection of paradox. So, an integration of duality, embodying complexity and simplicity. I have two master's degrees: social justice, social change, and divinity studies. I have two children. One is differently abled. I'm a US natural born citizen, but live in Europe. I'm African American, queer, non binary, and a single parent. I work in social and environmental justice, somatic regenerative focuses, and trauma stewardship. I support individuals with coaching and counseling and collectives with functional system design, change design, knowledge management, and have nearly a decade of experience supporting with diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy for organizations.
Wow, a busy life. Yeah, what a great intro. Thank you ever so much. Well, today's episode is all about well-being and resilience, and so I guess my first question is, what does well-being mean to you? And were there any sort of significant moments in your life or realizations that maybe shaped your approach to well-being?
Well being, like any other term, is open to various definitions or connotations, which are largely
Sure.
subjective and usually a result of culture and experience. So, well-being, often the definition and the reference is always going to be personal. And there isn't it isn't to say that if I give you a definition now that this is going to be the true one or the right one. But for me, it's like meditation, right? It's every thought has the potential to be meditative. The way you breathe, like how deep versus shallow, is a form of well-being. Your
Hmm.
mindfulness, how you are able to think of things that in effect create your reality, is a form of well-being. Your self-regard is a form of well-being. How you design your time, whether you take deep rest apart from sleep, having time to unwind and relax, but also resting in something that's not further draining you, like content that subconsciously seeds unrest or comes so quickly that it like hyperactivates your nervous system. Doing meaningful work that allows me to feel a sense of purpose and positive recognition for my part in life is well-being. I could say feeding yourself things that are enlivening, like dance and singing and yoga. But well-being for me is also like taking time to prepare for this podcast so I could have a little bit more ease coming in, or also stopping in the preparation to take a bike ride and be in nature and focus on the cadence of my breath. Um, yeah, that's how I define it.
Yeah, there's so much I kind of picked up on there. Is that um, first of all, that kind of grounding yourself with nature and being outdoors and being active. We Another episode that we recorded was with a lady who does ice water swimming.
I
Then
love
she does live
culture.
in. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Cold water swimming is definitely what she does to kind of re-ground herself, I guess. Um, so there was another part of the question and I was curious, was there a point in your life that made you think, I need to address this a bit more, like I need to, or if you, is this kind of, or is your approach to well-being always just been ingrained in your existence, I guess?
Yeah, I was definitely privileged to grow up and live over time most consistently in regenerative structures and
Hmm.
collectives. This allowed me to have a foundation in well-being, while it was also a cornerstone of my educational learning. So the ways people are brought out of a state of coherence due to oppressive systems. I have a hyperfixation on gathering tools for regulating my nervous system. And I've really prioritized safeguards for my sense of well being. And this is all kind of culminated in a solid foundation, which I consistently upkeep.
Yeah, and one of the things that, I mean, it's amazing that you kind of that's kind of at the forefront of your mind, is that um, that you need to put yourself first and put the people, because that'll ultimately benefit the people around you. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today was that in the kind of in the business world. So, stress is a common factor in leadership roles. So what are the sort of most important things for a leader to keep in mind to avoid being overwhelmed by the pressure of work, whether that be physical, cognitive, or emotional pressure?
Yeah, stress is definitely common. It's a state of being that we do not go through life without experiencing. And it's also linked to uncertainty. What I find helpful is being aware
Yeah.
that everyone else also has felt stress at one point. So, this focus on connection and compassion, the cognitive or emotional overwhelm that comes from repressing stress and shifting away from the discomfort through judgment, either fear of judgment from others or scapegoating and projecting fault onto others, is where the
Mm,
problems arise, I think, in teams and a lot of workplace culture. So, what I find to be a great tool for mitigating this overwhelm for those in leadership positions is relationship building. And
sure.
there's this funny story I'd love to tell about a guy who meditates like an hour every day. And when someone asked him, what about when the day is really busy? He said, well, I meditate 2 hours. And the point is that this rigid holding to urgency being used as an excuse to like skip natural steps of honest relating, whether to yourself or others, it doesn't really serve the purpose. So when you create a stronger emotional foundation with your relations or your team and yourself, you're then better able to ride out the waves of stress rather than switching to autopilot, lashing out in avoidance. So it's better to have like a collaborative efficacy and a trust built so that you feel safe to lay bare the parts of yourself or the aspects of your being that cause people to warm up to you and want to
Mm,
provide support, understanding, and collaboration. And when others prefer to lean towards you as a person, your role as a leader will support team cohesion. We've all heard about the power of vulnerability now. So this includes like authentic spaces for others to be vulnerable. And I mean, I could launch to another story. My kids, for a brief time, attended the Tibetan Children's Village. And when I went through admissions, they brought me into the headmaster's office. My kids aren't Tibetan. And they were discussing it amongst themselves in Tibetan. And then they turned to me, and I will literally never forget the 3 words he said to me. He said, "We are afraid." Um, and like just with
wow.
that, I wanted to support. I just was leaning forward. And he said, "We're afraid that if your son falls and breaks his arm, you're going to sue us." And I had happened to be in India because my youngest son has a physical disability and he needed regular
Mhm.
massage. And it's, a liability issue in the US. So I said I would never support this level of institutional violence. But there's so many different ways that this could have gone, but that beginning with vulnerability, that establishing a space of being true to the fact that we are human, I think really really does support people wanting to try harder, wanting to make something work.
Sure. I think I mean, yeah, there's so much to kind of pick out there. The I thought it was interesting, the person that you mentioned who spends an hour meditating every day, and then on the or even on the busier days goes, no, right, 2 hours, and makes that time. I think that's such a it's something that gets so overlooked, isn't it? When you're feeling the pressure from whether it's work or home life, where if you don't have a practice every day, it's really hard to kind of go, well, I haven't got, or rather, it's easy to say, oh, I haven't got time to do that. You just need to
Exactly.
make that time, don't you? To kind of
I mean, otherwise
to
it's less
focus
efficient.
on stuff.
We think that the focus on hyper productivity is efficient, but what I've noticed is I'm much more productive when those other things are in place rather than
Yeah.
chasing the sun.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I guess, is there any tangible takeaway that you could recommend to a leader that's maybe experiencing that and doesn't have um that thing at the moment that they do? What would be your advice to that person uh that needs something? What would be the first thing that you kind of advise them to do?
I mean, I spoke to this need of emotional intelligence in terms of relationship building and creating authentic spaces for vulnerability. So leaders should just recognize that every interaction that you engage with another person has the capacity to burden them or unburden them. And when you're going to burden them, it's important to get some token of consent. Even the way you
Mm,
modulate your tone, the nature of how you broach a subject, really supports people to get a sense that they're collaborators and not just subordinates. And I mean, I say all of this making an assumption that there is a strength. Why else would people be in leadership if not having this external, obvious, more yang strength? But do they have the yin to balance it? Can they be allowing while also having strong boundaries?
mm,
Can they give opportunities for people to offer consent while also having expectations of engagement and feedback? Like, how do you let people know where they are at in terms of those expectations? And how do you find out what people actually need to meet those expectations? Do you have that relationship in place that allows people to have the conversation when something is not functioning properly, inside or out of work? To say, hey, the disorganized files make me feel like there are three tasks that need to be done before I can properly do the one that's currently assigned to me. Or and then how can we organize this efficiently? Or to say, hey, my dad died, or my kids have been really sick, and it's a hard time, and receive a response where they don't regret sharing their wider life and reality. This often really assists individuals in feeling seen, included, and able to be more present, involved, and engaged in the workplace.
yeah. And I think that plays out not only from a leader in a or a person in a leadership position, but it sounds like that type of behavior can come from anywhere within an organization or anywhere within a team. Um, and I suppose that what what might be some of the obvious signs of the sort of early signs of burnout to try and get to kind of avoid getting to full burnout? Is what in your view are those sort of early symptom signs? And I suppose
Honestly,
my second part of that question is my second part of that question, sorry, was what can we do to kind of avoid burnout altogether?
yeah. So, as far as recognizing signs of burnout, honestly, I think the best approach is preventative, not curative. So, you need to be asking the critical questions like, am I happy? Do I feel fulfilled in what I'm doing? Do I feel seen in a sense of dignity and respect in the spaces where I am? And
Mhm.
ignoring negative answers to any of these questions will lead to burnout. You don't have to like make a big change. You don't have to quit your job and move to Bali, but it will help so much if you know that you need more and that you can be trusted to prioritize that for yourself. So, building
Yeah,
self trust is a huge part of resilience. And the more it can look like more care and attention to your joy and sense of ease, perhaps it's more spaces and people who are regenerative and give you a sense of being honored, this work life balance piece. Yeah, you can carve out more of what you need in new places, but what you resist persists. So if you ignore these truths and try to use extractive culturalization to take what is missing, say, paying for spa days as like almost, this kind of escapist thing, then maybe it's not going to be as restful as when you think this is my self care, this is my prioritizing myself. And well being is certainly a mindset, and resilience is partially built by being consistent and holding that mindset. And preventative, again, you should be in therapy. Like if you can afford it, and I know about some really affordable remote options if you're struggling with it. But if you already have someone to talk to assess what's really going on with you, it won't sneak up on you. If you can't take the
yeah,
time for yourself with yourself, then you need help before the ache of stress turns into the cancer of burnout.
yeah. I think that's really powerful, and I'm sure a lot of people will probably resonate with that. What I really liked was your saying around what you resist persists. I think that's a really nice way of summarizing, that if you don't kind of tackle a problem head on, then it's just going to keep going. Particularly if it's your own problem, then the only person that can really make that change is you. Um, yeah, I can think of so many situations where that is so true to life. So yeah, I think that was a really valuable sort of insight
I
there.
mean,
Um,
you started, this is an issue. It's not like, how do I look for a sneaking sign? It's like, let's just be honest that this is starting to be what's normalized. So it's
yeah,
just like health, you either pay extra in good quality food, or you pay extra in the doctor after the fact. So
yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I think there's so much to be taken away from what we've just been talking about there's that sort of individual ownership on your own well-being, but I think there's also that, and what you've already talked about is that noticing, which is well, it's that noticing is what the first part of Impact's leadership model is all about, is kind of noticing what's going on around you, um, and kind of having that courage, well, deciding what you think might be the best way of moving forward, whether that's um, depending on the situation, having that courage to then take an action, um, and which is a very kind of butchered description, a breakdown of our leadership model, but the it kind of it just rings true with pretty much everything that you've just said, and whether that's again self leadership or leadership for another. I think that's there's definitely parallels in what you've just been talking about. So let's maybe move on to from personal well-being to kind of building that healthy organizational culture. How can organizations create a culture that supports employee well-being and resilience and mitigates burnout?
yeah, so obviously, companies have had a lot of focuses towards this goal, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, well-being, or leadership. And each one of these is a relevant focus for that outcome. But there's a tendency to cherry pick and throw out important features, which they will fail to meet the outcome without. So in DEI, it's
Mm,
definitely standardizing promotional velocity based on inclusivity metrics. So if you can get ahead and still not properly tend to belonging, then this bad seed leadership energy will persist. And well being is often efficacy, quality control, and knowledge management. So if you give people access to resources like therapy or spa freebies, but they're really poor quality, and then not
mm,
monitor, or your employees don't know how to access, or your leaders don't know how to direct people to access to these resources, well, it's a bust, or it's an expensive projection of well being. You have to prioritize it and not just pay lip service. And the way to do that is
yeah,
accountability. And accountability to well being and belonging, which is a major prop for well being, will create a healthy workplace culture. It's kind of like put your money where your mouth is, but not for the companies, for the
yeah,
leaders. If they can't do it, they really shouldn't be getting raises and promotions. Also, believe me, there are plenty of regenerative people out there that have a great capacity for shared leadership structures. So you can keep great minds for business affluence and have someone else step in to properly steward teams. And a more coherent leadership will
mm,
ultimately save the organization money and create the framework for the company's innovation and growth.
yeah. It's totally accurate, and I think that you just that sense of being felt like you've been looked after is going to ultimately end up increasing productivity, isn't it? Like, because you're going to if you feel looked after, you're going to want to give back as an employee, aren't you? So it's well within the organization's interest to kind of put well-being at the top of their priority list, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really important
Um,
to know, absolutely have leaders or company culture with like fried circuits that are burnt out and inefficient in one way or another, and it has a reverberating negative effect. Depending on the degree,
yeah,
they also under stress by trauma offloading, they're negatively conditioning their teams in a number of ways. First, they're making fear-based decisions, so avoiding a bad outcome rather than accomplishing a great one, and that has an effect, like on how things are organized or where the bar is set. They're conveying that to their team not to aim too high or try too hard or make things better. They're change adverse. This can show as a focus on crisis control, bare minimum, or work that's meant to look good but not to focus on accomplishing much because it feels too risky. And secondly, these teams or companies are non-inclusive to
Yeah.
neurodivergence. So one sure thing about individuals with neurodivergence is they're not prone to overly conformist spaces, which is why when properly funneled, these individuals are great catalysts for innovation and the leaps that come from original thinking. But if the framework is too rigid and a fear-based status quo, don't rock the boat, these individuals will not flourish in these environments. So of course you see a lack of retention, further lack of innovation.
Have you seen any examples, real life examples that have got it spot on that you're able to talk about?
Regenerative spaces. Um,
Well, yeah, organizational culture around well-being, regenerative, as you said. Are there any organizations out there that, again, maybe you don't want to name names, and rightly so, but are there case or things that you've seen in your line of work where you've seen, okay, you've got this absolutely nailed, or is there still a lot of work to do?
yeah, I mean, they're definitely organizational types. They tend to have um, an overall mission or vision that is
Mm,
aligned with that framework. So rather than it being kind of a side feature that they're trying to integrate for efficiency or whatever their main goals or visions are, when it's core to what the entire organization is built around, it's attracting a certain type of people. Obviously, like you mentioned, leaders are oftentimes in impossible situations. They're in company cultures that are highly problematic. The stress and the
mm.
problematic frameworks are trickle down effect from higher up, and then just on it goes. And some people have the resilience to be able to dam this like negative uh, framework and lack of functionality and create a hyper coherent team. But many are just like a product of their environments. And so yeah, there are absolutely systems that are properly, like, they're more functionally organized in terms of well-being and resilience and regenerative frameworks. And it just tends to permeate throughout. It's the way that they're engaging with their clientele. It's the way that they engage with their employees. It's the way that they're engaging with their partners. It's like it permeates.
Yeah, yeah. We one little thing that impact us as to kind of help with the focus on well-being is that, so like a lot of organizations, we have a Monday morning meeting every Monday morning, but we put aside the same hour that we would have on the last Monday of every month to to allow our people to focus on something that they would do for their well-being. And admittedly, yeah, it's 1 hour out of every week, but it's 1 hour that you wouldn't normally have if you continued to have that same Monday morning meeting. But it's a really nice way of just allowing your people to kind of have some time for themselves to do something to kind of focus on their own well-being. So that was one of the things that, one
And I
little
think
thing that we did to kind of help.
it's also really great to have this framework be a regular and consistent aspect of how the space is organized. So, like, one of the things I always
Yeah.
suggest is redesigning meeting structures. Like, I know you're going to ask me
Yes.
to offer something at the end, but like starting meetings with something that is really physically regenerative and really connective, and meeting and practicing within that framework of something that's nourishing, I think is really great too.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, on the theme of meetings, one idea was just, instead of making the meeting an hour, especially with, when you're so, we do all our meeting, well, so many of us do all our meetings online now, just schedule 45 minutes or 50 minutes, so that at the end of that hour, you've actually got 10 minutes before you need to go on to your next back to back. Yeah,
Absolutely.
such a great,
Transition time is super essential. Like, what do we say?
yeah,
Body breaks. Like, when is that supposed to happen if it's back to back?
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're getting some really nice tangible takeaways now. So, and you're right. I am going to ask you for another tangible takeaway, um, uh, which is something. So, a couple of years ago, we did do a podcast episode around well-being with somebody from our internal team, and one of the things we did there was eye yoga, which which I had to go out and I'll admit I haven't done since. But maybe if you could offer something that we could do online now in the next few minutes that people could do either whilst they're watching this or, of course, after the fact if they feel that it works for them. So, yeah, have you got a little exercise that we could do?
Absolutely. This is one of my specialties. And one of my go
Excellent.
to is EFT, or emotional freedom techniques. It's a form of acupressure tapping. There are a few case studies actually that I can share about how it's been effectively used to support and alleviate intense experiences of trauma. And those exercises and resources are also in my book, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging in the Workplace and Everyday Life. So let's just get us set up. There's actually a phrase, and it goes like this: even though, insert problem here, I deeply and completely accept myself. So we're going to say stress. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And we start by just tapping the pinky side edges of the hand together. This is the karate chop point, and saying the phrase. So even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you can just tap this divot in front of on the chest, in front under the shoulders. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you can just tap your eyebrows. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you tap the side of the eyes. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you tap under the eyes on the cheeks. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you tap under the nose above the lips. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you tap under the lips on the chin. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you can tap this whole heart, chest, thymus area. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then, as if you're hugging yourself, you can tap this side of the ribs. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you can just go right under the rib cage, on the stomach. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you do the outer edge of the thumb. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then the outer edge of the next finger. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then the outer edge of the middle finger, same side. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Skip the finger, do the pinky. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then there's this little webbing in between the pinky and the ring finger. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now we'll go through it once more, but it's important to start the phrase with something that's like brings the stress and emotion out. And then we can go into more
Hmm.
positive phrases. So we're going to do this karate chop point again. And this actually corresponds to the small intestine. And we can say, I am jumping with joy. And then we can go to the
I am
chest.
jumping with joy.
Yeah, in the thymus area, and say, I have trust and courage.
I have trust and courage.
And then we can do the eyebrows again, corresponding to the bladder, and say, I am in peace.
I am in peace.
And then the side of the eye, which corresponds to the gallbladder, and say, I reach out with caring.
I reach out with caring.
And then under the eye, which corresponds to the stomach, and say, I am content.
I am content.
And then under the nose, which is the governing channel, I am standing tall and overcoming any problem.
I am standing tall and overcoming any problem.
And then the chin, corresponding to the central channel, I am clear, centered, and secure.
I am clear, centered, and secure.
Now we can do this under the rib, which is the spleen. Sorry, this is the liver, and say, I have good fortune.
I have good fortune.
And then again, hugging the body side, this is the spleen. And we can say, I have confidence in my future.
I have confidence in my future.
You can do the other hand this time for the thumb and say, I am humble, I am tolerant, I am modest.
I am humble, I am tolerant, I am modest.
That's the lung. The next finger is the large intestine. I am worthy.
I am worthy.
The middle finger is the reproductive system. I am relaxed.
I am relaxed.
And the little finger is the heart. I am forgiving.
I am forgiving.
And then the gambit, again, is the triple warmer. I am safe.
I am safe.
There you go.
There we go.
You enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Really?
I just took a big breath there, actually, because
No,
it
it's
isn't something I
relaxing.
normally do, I must admit. Yeah, it is quite relaxing. I totally will be the first to admit that I don't practice yoga. I don't do anything like that, and so it does feel. Again, I am totally out of my comfort zone with that type of thing, but I can absolutely see the benefit of it, and I'm sure there'll be people that either do that on a regular basis and totally feel totally. So maybe this is it. Maybe after today, I will be a changed person. Um, so, well, thank you ever so much for that. I really appreciate you bringing that to us today and bring it to our audience. So yeah, thank you ever so much for that. And that brings us to our final question of today's episode, which is the same question that we have been asking all of our guests, which is that if you were to start everything again, if you were to start your career from the beginning, what would be the best piece of advice you would give yourself?
I would say you're doing great. Everything's going to be all right. I'm rooting for you, and you are enough.
Oh, yeah, that's lovely. And I must say that the you're not the first person to kind of not change anything, which is kind of is becoming a recurring theme, and we're starting to starting to see more of that, which is really good, because it shows kind of that belief in self, no matter when it was in their life. And also, one thing I mentioned in another episode that we recorded recently was that sometimes when we ask that question, we then realize that actually it might be that they're not living that advice right now. And so, but it sounds like you're totally all over it, which is, you say that, it sounds like you say that to yourself every day. So yeah, that certainly comes through. Well, Sahar, thank you ever so much again for joining us today and for everything that you've brought to this episode. We really, really appreciate it. And that just leaves me to say that if you would like to find out any more about myself or Sahar, or you'd maybe like to buy a copy of her book, then you can find all of the links that you need in the description of this episode. So thank you again for Sahar for joining me. And until the next time, take care. Hey, you're on my mind.